many of the bad businesses that Diwani have mentioned will continue for maybe 5, 10, 20 years, but because of Corona, they will disappear and they will exit the cycle at this early stage, and only the healthy businesses will stay, and the new investments that is more focused on the digital and virtual economy will be emerging. So I'm not really, I'm sorry to say, I'm not really very optimistic. I can see a lot of hardships. Unemployment would really become a serious problem. It's already a serious problem. It will get much worse because of this combination between Corona and the oil prices. I'll stop here, Baybars.
Yes, dear Dr. Al-Jabbar, thank you very much. And I think it was a very good, yeah. I think there's a voice problem with Abdul. Okay, do you hear us, dear Dr. Al-Jabbar? Okay, thank you very much for insights. And let's move to Tommy Davis. And dear Tommy, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Baybars.
Yes. Dear Tommy, could you please give some insights from Africa? Africa is the emerging continent of the world economy, star of the G20 leaders, and Germany 2 years ago focused only on Africa in all G20, most of the G20 meetings. So, but I think Africa is lucky, not like the other regions of the world, because we don't hear so much about the cases of the virus from Africa, like the other regions of the world. So, could you please give some insights from Africa, and what will be the impact of this Mr. COVID-19 after it starts visiting more frequently African continent, dear Tommy?
Well, thanks a lot for that, Baybars, and thanks for putting this together. First of all, we need to recognize that I think the closest we've got to Africa is the United States, where the United States has 50 states. In Africa, we have 55 countries. And each of those countries is a sovereign entity reacting to the pandemic differently. And funnily enough, you can see the difference in attitude from the South in South Africa, where it has hit hard and it's just parallel to what's happening in Europe, all the way through to my home country, Nigeria in the West, where we've been on lockdown now for 2 weeks, but nobody's quite sure exactly why we're having a lockdown where we're not testing people. Then you've got Kenya, and of course you've got North Africa, and then Central Africa. From where I sit, there are two particular reasons why the pandemic is hitting us at a time when we're particularly vulnerable on the continent. The first one, depressingly, is linked to the collective failure, and I hate to say this, of the industrialized countries to tackle climate change. If we look, 2019 was catastrophic for us on the continent. We had the natural disasters striking Zambia and Zimbabwe. We had the tropical cyclones in Mozambique, that ravaged crops across East Africa in terms of locusts. And we're talking of the locusts threatening up to 20 million people in terms of food security. So you'll have to excuse us if we don't put the coronavirus as the #1 priority on the continent. If I take Nigeria, we've got Lassa fever. Lassa fever has killed 10 times more people in Nigeria than the coronavirus has at this point in time. That is not to say it's not going to hit us, okay? But I have to say, unfortunately, we're poorly prepared for this. Right, last year, between 2017 and 2019, most of our governments were busy issuing euro bonds. We're talking of about $130 billion worth of euro bonds that have been issued by African governments. We're going to have to pay all of that. Okay, so these are costly. Debt servicing is becoming a critical component. So given our vulnerability, the economic fallout of COVID-19 is likely to be even more devastating here than anywhere else. Now, when it comes to the, it was interesting listening to, hello?
Hello, we are listening to you.
Oh, okay. Listening to my friend earlier speaking about oil, okay? We have oil producers, some of which are still recovering from the 2014-16 collapse in the commodity prices. Now, with oil prices imploding, okay, and we're talking of it falling under $25 a barrel from $70 in January when people were putting their budgets in, you can start to imagine the kind of outlooks we're talking about, especially when you compound that with the fact that China's total imports is decreasing. So it's sort of a body punch to most African countries all over the place. So it's not surprising that the Economic Commission for Africa has slashed its 2020 growth forecast for the region from 3.2, which is what they were talking about earlier in the year. Now it's down to 1.8, even though we're expecting a population growth of about 2.7%. So you can start to see the challenges. And when you add that to the fact that we're starting to see unprecedented capital flight out of the continent, over the past month, nearly $50 billion has already rushed out of our capital markets. So we're getting hit right, left, and center on this. So this is actually going to precipitate a sharp deterioration in living conditions on the continent and potentially a collapse of the national health systems, okay, which all of them are factors that are actually probably going to increase the migratory pressures towards Europe. And I know people don't want to hear that, but that's the reality. Okay, I mean, Germany and China have pledged 600 billion and 400 billion in stimulus packages. We don't have that kind of funding. Let's not forget, Africa arguably is why they invented the term HIPC, highly indebted poor countries. Out of something like about 30 that were identified, over 20 of them are on our continent. So you start to see that even though the IMF has unlocked some money to help poor countries, they're talking of leveraged countries that are highly indebted. So we're probably not going to qualify for a lot of that. So from where I sit, it's a serious challenge. We are, as countries and as governments, everybody's trying to do the best they can. But I have to say, the international community cannot stand idle. Okay, as a coronavirus, national self-interest, trade wars amongst major powers is going to derail the growth on this continent, which everybody was looking forward to. So I'm sorry if I sound all doom and gloom, but I believe our role and our responsibility at this point in time is to paint a clear and proper picture of what is happening in the environments around us. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. I received some message that if it is possible for Tommy to make his video on, and they want to see you, Tommy.
I tried it. It's my machine's just, the video on my machine is just not working.
No, okay, so, okay. So, but the same person who is speaking, I mean, if you the picture belongs to him, by the way.
Yes, exactly. So you see my video is on now.
Yeah, okay.
But and you don't see anything.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, dear Tommy. Dr. El Jabbar, maybe you can say hello to everybody because they also sent a message that we want to see Dr. El Jabbar. He is now live. And now my next speaker is Israel Pons. Yes, you are here, Israel. Dear Israel, just a second, please. And Israel, let's hear more about Latin America and the Caribbean, and what is the impact of Mr. COVID in this region.
Yes, thank you, Baybars, and hello to everyone from Mexico. As you can probably hear, I got some sound effects going on between dogs barking and birds singing and every other noise that comes into this type of webinars when you are doing it from home. And I think that's one of the first things that COVID-19 has taught us, that we are all human online as well when we do these webinars. There is a family around us, and those type of things are part of the new digital way of doing business or communications or interacting with each other. I will just say 2 or 3 points on the macro environment of COVID-19 or coronavirus 19, because I think there is a lot of macro economics that can be said and taught. And since we are about entrepreneurship, I will put my second part of my intervention on this with what initiatives are happening in Latin America at this stage. One of the biggest challenges that we had prior to the coronavirus, I think, is that in Latin America, you always have these big up and downs with regards to social issues, and a lot of them to do with political issues as well. So we had seen some demonstrations on the streets of different capital cities of Latin America, for different reasons, most of them obviously with people being unhappy with the level of purchasing power that you have, the great inequality economically in Latin America. And that has always been an issue that we have seen and a challenge. We are a Latin America and the Caribbean have always seen these inequalities, and has always been a challenge. You know, just to give some figures on it, as 52% of the population in Latin America live below the poverty line. So we know that first of all there is a social gathering of unrest. What does that mean when you have coronavirus? Is that you also, like probably in Africa and other continents, that a lot of the people that are going to be hurt are the day-to-day people that live of the day-to-day business. And when you shut down the economy and you shut down the streets to people, then it's very difficult for people to survive on a day-to-day basis. And I think I want to emphasize, because that's the reality of it. The majority of people, they don't care if the shares have gone up or down for Apple or for whatever other company. That's just a figure that people in social media can be sharing. But actually what they care is whether or not there are enough people in the street for you to be able to have your food stall selling that food to the people in the street. For you to have your product that you normally sell is for people to have the day-to-day economy running. That is the biggest challenge, and that is the biggest worry that we have in Latin America, and I think in a lot of other countries. But because social media tendency is to see about the macroeconomics and the macro health issues, we forget about the day-to-day running of things. So on the other hand, yes, or most of the health systems in Latin America and the Caribbean, they won't be able to cope like it has happened even in countries where they have a first world type of health system available. So we are getting prepared for what's going to be a disaster with health in Latin America and the Caribbean. We are very positive, and we always think that we're going to come out of it and it's going to be not so bad. And that is correct. We are going to get together as a society and do better things. So what happens when in Latin America and the Caribbean, when we have these challenges, we get together, we come together, and it takes the turn of organizations like Escala, which is the angel network from Latin America, where most of the angel clubs and angel networks belong to this. In Escala, we have more than 4,000 angel investors from all Latin America and the Caribbean. And what has happened is immediately Scala took action and sent a challenge to entrepreneurs in a way to create innovative ideas for Latin America and the Caribbean on how we can have initiatives that can help during this situation. What can and how does Scala support this together with the Inter-American Development Bank is obviously we will support them with access to those 4,000 angel investors, to mentorship, to also have access to the market so that we can connect with these entrepreneurs and their ideas and also push them and help them. And the other part is that Scala is doing is we have launched the Venture Academy together with Connect Americas, which is another platform done by the Inter-American Development Bank, which has access to a lot of the markets in Latin America. And this is with the objective to help the entrepreneurs to be able to deal with the challenges that coronavirus is bringing to the environment. So on this Venture Academy, there will be webinars for the next 2.5 months that are going to be delivered to the entrepreneurs. They will be free to all those entrepreneurs. Tommy Davis is taking part on those. Paulo Andres is also has been very kind and donated his time to be part of those. And the Scala team is organizing all of this with Connect Americas. So those are the two initiatives that we have launched as a Scala organization with all the board of Scala, and actually reacting very quick and say how we're going to support our entrepreneurs and how we're going to make sure that our angel investors feel integrated also and they can support these entrepreneurs. So we see great challenges ahead. Our health systems are not capable of coping with it. Our economy is going to be suffering, but this is a challenge that we have in front of us. So we're going to have to react in the best way possible.
Thank you very much, dear Israel. Israel Pons is also the head of the Global Investment Department of the WBAF Business School, working with Dr. Doane. And he also delivered the Global Mentorship course program with a proficiency test of the WBAF Business School. We had 30 great graduates this year. Thank you, Israel. Okay, Jonathan, do you hear me? Are you online, dear Jonathan?
I'm here. I'm here.
Yes, great. Okay.
I'm just trying to be socially responsible and protect everyone's bandwidth when I can.
Yes, great. Jonathan, you are the founder and president of the Global Entrepreneurs Network, and your operations here are in around 190 countries, maybe more than this. So you are collecting information from all over the world. So what are the insights? What is happening in the world, and what is GEN doing to cope with, to support entrepreneurs in these difficult times?
Well, Baybars, first of all, thank you for coordinating this. Great leadership on doing this, and I think credit to you in bringing everyone together as quickly and as often as possible. I'll start first with a global observation, and I think one of the things we all need to recognize is that we have seen a decline in global attention to common problems, whether they be economic, whether they be the environment, and in large part due to countries like the United States has adopted a very nationalistic approach to its business affairs and its political and economic affairs. But I think the COVID-19 challenge has really opened that up and made that apparent of what happens when we don't take a global approach. And obviously we feel as an organization that is truly global, our people are spread across the world. And speaking to you, of course, for the World Business Angels Forum, that maybe the leadership here in pointing that out is something that we all have a responsibility to do. It's not that we're attacking our own governments, but maybe we're just reminding everybody of the importance of our doing things together. working together by staying apart, of course, but we're nevertheless, I think, in a period of time where this has become very stark to us all, whether it be Tumi's concerns that, a lot of the parts of the world, the parts of Africa will be much more heavily impacted by this, and how do we work together in that regard, or whether it be the challenges faced in Latin America. So what we're doing globally is, first of all, as you know, at the Global Entrepreneurship Network, in addition to the Global Business Angels Network, we also have a fairly robust, extensive government engagement. We call it the Startup Nations Policy Network. That community represents the staff and ministers from many nations around the world. In particular, the ministers and the staff that are what we call startup savvy. They're focused on entrepreneurship and innovation, whether, mostly on technical programs and support, or whether mostly on tackling regulatory issues arising from industry disruption and other growth of the innovation and industry. And that community, we at Gent have been leading very actively every single day for the past 30 days. First of all, to deal with the most important thing, which is how we're going to deal with, as Tumi and others I think have mentioned on this call, the immediate challenge of so many people in our world who obviously live day to day on what they earn that day. And so these government bailout packages, we've been facilitating a substantial amount of coordination among policymakers about trying to share knowledge, information, experience about what's working, what's not working. So for example, I was up most of the night with the US Senate staff talking about the language they were about to release the next day, which resulted in the $2 trillion package, talking about the impact on venture-backed firms. So we might all take this role, I think, in, shall I say, guiding our national governments to also take advantage of global cooperation here, which, to be perfectly frank, we're just not seeing. I've seen a lot of media criticisms from the EU. I've seen media criticisms for a lot of our multinational institutions that really have not really provided any added value, certainly not in the way that many of the grassroots organizations and some of the communities have done. The other thing that we're doing in addition to aligning a lot of US government policy around, a lot of government policy around bailout packages and the lessons learned from as those begin to unveil, is that we're working very hard on sharing a lot of other information. We've come together with a platform called Alice, which is an AI-driven platform, giving people access to the very latest and best information about where you can get different resources, where you can talk to others that are facing the same challenges. We've also been doing multiple hackathons, and we've done a variety of other projects at the Gen level. And I will say, obviously, our first priority, like all of yours, was of course to look after our employees and our community. But one of the ways we decided was best to do that is we just needed to jump in the driving seat and see where were the gaps that we might contribute to filling, as opposed to simply sitting back and saying, well, I don't know what to do. So we've sort of got on with some things. I'm not sure we've necessarily done the most useful things, but we've certainly tried to bring a global perspective to it. But let me, if I can, mention, we've also put out something that we call the 3 R's, repurpose, retool, and redeploy, as a little bit of guidance to some of the entrepreneurs directly. This is led by the chairman of our board, Jeff Hoffman, who's been very much an advocate of this idea. And I think it's a question it's a strategy that's really important, whatever the business strategy is, but it's a priority that's very important for all entrepreneurs to do right now. I'm very struck by the opening comments that Paul made about the fact that we have for the first time in history, we have a common problem, a uniquely common problem. And I think we need to think much more deeply about where the opportunities come from that. And I think our lessons as investors and entrepreneurs, and whether our time, whether we're educating, whether we're actually putting resources into it, is that there's one thing I think we all know, and that is that entrepreneurs relish uncertainty. And of course, we're faced with this extraordinary period of uncertainty. And if Paul's right and says, hey, this is a common problem universally across the world, no matter how our governments responded to it in different ways, as Paul mentioned. And that, I think, is the essence of what we've got to focus on. Entrepreneurs love to jump in. When you shake up all the rules, they love it. They come in and say, look, we don't get scared and terrified by this. We come in and say, how do we take advantage of that? And we've got a value system of most entrepreneurs around the world. I say most. I'm afraid there's still a lot of them in the Valley in New York who don't fit this category. But I would say most entrepreneurs, yes, they want to do well. Of course, they want to do well of their investors too. But the important thing is they're not willing to do it at the expense of not doing good at the same time. And I think that's really important for us to remember, as the majority of our citizens in our country are not risk takers. They're probably not entrepreneurs. Maybe in Nigeria, actually, I think you've got the highest percentage of risk-taking entrepreneurs to me in the world. But the point is, I think you've got an awful lot of people that are looking for leadership and direction that's not necessarily coming from their government right now. Certainly not a lot of certainty. As you said, Paul, it's difficult for the average person to understand exponential data. And so as a result, I think we need to be inspiring in our ecosystems and communities across the world. You know, as we say, national boundaries is porous to innovation. It really doesn't matter where it happens. We should be inspiring communities to be thinking on their feet about the fact that it is a uniquely common challenge, and that it's not something to be frightened of. It's something to be embraced, to be attacked. And I think it's the moment for entrepreneurs to be those leaders. Not leaders because they're out there looking for business opportunities to give our angel investors an excellent return on their investment. But right now, our angel investors are, let's remember, you're angels, okay? So the important thing here is that we've got an opportunity to be able to allow our entrepreneurs. So what we've been telling them is try to repurpose, meaning try to figure out what your skill sets are, what your assets are, what do you do really well. And then to try to retool, to use the time, especially time that we're all frankly forced not to be doing business in the same way that we do it, to be able to retool what you're doing and to think about what are those capital improvements intellectually that you wanted to do that you've been putting off because you're so busy with day-to-day opportunities. And finally, then to bring those together to look at where the new opportunities are arising, which are, I think, is more and more evident, and to redeploy those skill sets, those assets, and to be able to rethink that. So I know for Paul, this is probably pretty standard transformation at a time of digital disruption. But I think for most of us, we need to break it down, unpack it for the average entrepreneur and say, you know what, don't sit there and worry about going out of business. Focus on how you're going to adjust to that. I know that's not very comforting if you're living hand to mouth. I know that's not very comforting if you are in an environment where you have no support. But I think we have to focus on creating role models that are trying to look at the glass half full, which our entrepreneurs do so well, and to really look and find ways that we can help support them and inspire them to do that. So I think it's an exciting time in many respects, despite the immense tragedy that we have to tackle, the immense amount of mourning we have to do. Obviously, I'm based in the United States. You know, this country's been taken completely by surprise. But I think our challenge ahead is what do we learn from it, and how do we enable our entrepreneurs to be not just the economic leaders, but I think the social leaders in helping drive forward solutions. I just want to say one other thing, because it's sort of politically correct. I once testified on Capitol Hill, and I got into big trouble in the United States because I suggested that we should stop trying to save so many of the companies in our SBA programs, that really we should just frankly let go. And what I actually said was, we're just encouraging the talent in those companies to recycle, to reform, to form new teams, to recycle their ideas. And I think that's something we should allow to happen now, because a lot of companies, as was pointed out, maybe it was time for them to go, but look, how many of you have invested or be led companies where you just don't want to let it go because you're committed to it? And you said, no, maybe it's time to do this. It could be personal pride. It could be some other factor that's driven you to do it. But I think for a lot of our companies, it is time that in a way, COVID-19 will provide, whether voluntary or involuntary, an opportunity for us to have a kind of refresh on many of our business models, to think through the new needs of the future, but also to take that talent and the investment in the existing companies that must go, and to try to turn that around and make that something which we can channel towards the new demands of what will be a very different marketplace. And I think we're all following all the social media to think about what trends society and business will have in the post-COVID-19 world. So I've spoken for too long, but I did want to have a chance to express my point of view about my sincere anxiety at the lack of global leadership. And I think we can't change government collaboration and cooperation, but I certainly think we can empower entrepreneurs to quietly do this, not in a political way, but just quietly working out how can communities help each other, how can we innovate together, and how can we map out what I call, a post-COVID-19 regeneration that has to be a positive story. It has to be something where we're looking at how we're going to not just get our economies back in business, but how do we actually come out of this stronger as a result of it. So thanks for having me, Baybars.
Great. Thank you very much, dear Jonathan. Maybe this virus is going to give all entrepreneurs an opportunity to incubate themselves and create new things, and maybe the things that they have never thought of. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Linda, how are you? Our only woman, the speaker. I think listening to 8 men and then speaking is something, a privilege, isn't it, Linda? Linda, thank you very much for joining us. By the way, I want to say Happy Easter to all who is celebrating it. And Linda, what is happening in North America? You are the emeritus president of the Angel Capital Association, and last year more than $25 billion invested in startups in the United States. There are around more than 300,000 angel investors, and you presented all them in your leadership time. So my question is, what is happening in North America, and do you think angel investors should go on investing in startups? And what is going to happen to the investors, angel investors of the startups who proposed and convinced them for their shared economy business models?
Well, thank you, Baybars, for putting together this webinar. And I'd like to pick up on something that Jonathan has mentioned, and that there are some opportunities. Certainly, we are seeing them in North America. I'd like to talk about 4 of them. One, obviously, is healthcare. The second is robotics. Digitization would be the third. And as our keynoter said, supply chain would be a 4th, where we're seeing some real opportunities that startups are making. Clearly in healthcare, the delivery of healthcare services in a remote fashion is an opportunity for startups. For example, any organization startup that's been able to improve the delivery online of prescription services is something that certainly we see as a growth opportunity. The provision of education for nurses is another opportunity online. We need a lot more nurses during this period of time. Startups that are focusing on ed tech for the health community is an opportunity as well. In the robotics field, because we're trying to minimize human contact, any robotics that deal with warehousing, picking up, identifying, packing, and supplying goods that are then shipped is an opportunity we see in the startup community. We have a company in our portfolio that recently reverse engineered a respirator to be able to identify the parts that were critical to it. They have a 3D printing press, and they've been able to manufacture using their 3D printing some of these key components for respirators. So great example of a startup that's redeploying and re-identifying along Jonathan's suggestions what can be done. Finally, in the area of supply chain, I see the coronavirus as possibly accelerating the move to driverless vehicles, because there will be an interest in delivering as well as deploying through trucks and private automobiles, driverless capability. So maybe that's an area where some of our business angels also want to invest. From the standpoint of whether or not you should be still investing during this period of time of the pandemic, I'd say most definitely. But I'd say to both business angels as well as those that run business angel funds, is that our primary responsibility is to our portfolio companies. So please work with them, identify those that need perhaps some additional bridge funding, hold some of your resources aside to provide that follow-on funding for those companies that are already in your portfolio. And then look again at new startups that are pivoting and redeploying and can really address some of the coronavirus needs that I've mentioned previously. Either robotics, I'm sure there are many more, artificial intelligence, supply chain, as well as healthcare and digitization of anything, be it gaming or entertainment, because while many of us are going to stay home for a while, there's certainly some opportunities there. Thank you, Baybars.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Linda. Thanks so much. I'm moving to Paulo Andres. Paulo, are you around?
Yes, I'm here around, yes.
Okay, just a second. Can we see you?
Yes, I'm here. You are seeing me. In the top.
Yes, I saw you. Just a second. Now, okay. Now you are here. Yes. Paulo, you are the Emeritus President of EBAN, European Business Angels Network. It represents the European business angels landscape. And what are you happy with the response of EU governments to COVID-19 from angel investor point of view, and also from entrepreneur point of view, because you are one of the co-investors of the Toys R Us IB2. So you are an angel investor. You are also the investor of a big SME. So are you happy with the EU government's response?
I think that what is happening now in Europe is an example of what should not happen. So someone mentioned that the countries agreed through the European stability mechanism to have that the countries can get 500 billion euros, but just Germany itself got 750 billion just for the country. So this is a real, for instance, to a country like Portugal, there will be around 4 billion euros. When in the last crisis, that was the financial crisis, Portugal needed 75 billion euros. And we, through this mechanism, only 4. So this is a kind of a joke. And this puts a bit the context of solidarity among countries. I think countries are trying to solve their own problems and forgetting that the virus doesn't choose borders, and the virus can jump from one country to the other country. So I think that the response of Europe has been very slow, is insufficient, and we need to see how things will go. Of course, the main problem in Europe now is from the countries. Is each government is trying to do an analysis of how many people will be unemployed and how much money they will need to pay for these people that will be unemployed, and also the loss of taxes that the government will lose if companies go bankrupt. So, and this is the equation that each country is doing versus supporting now the economy. Because if the countries, if there is not a common mechanism in Europe, a real one, not this kind of joke that countries have approved, what is the risk is countries like Italy, which is a very big country in Europe. If the debt of Italy goes to 160% of GDP, then Italy can get out of the markets, and this can lead to Italy get out of the Eurozone in terms of the countries that use euro. And if Italy is forced to go out of the Eurozone, then there is a question mark if the other countries will go after. Then what happens to Spain? What happens to countries that are not having this support from solidarity from the other countries? So if Europe is unable to create a mechanism where countries can finance themselves at normal rates, the problem is that Europe can eventually collapse, and this will create a problem. So we have now a health problem. We will have for sure, and we are having this economic problem, despite it's not very big now, but of course this problem will come. And if we are not very careful, then we have a financial problem. Some governments in Europe try to put money in the economy through banks. And this is a question mark, why we are putting all this money that the governments are flooding into the market through banks and not through other players. And what are the banks doing? Asking private guarantees to entrepreneurs, and of course startups will not have access the funding through the banks. So it's important that the countries, and a good example of that is France, that they have the BPI, and BPI is providing direct financing to startups and not through the normal banks, which they can be used but should not be the sole source of this funding. I think we in Europe, we need to come to a conclusion very, very soon in terms of the countries and the mechanism. In terms of the European Union, the response of the European Union is very limited because they don't have so much resources. They have tried to do some rules to help entrepreneurs and try to find solutions for the vaccine, but it's not sufficient, and I'm a bit concerned about the future of Europe as we see it today.
Do you think, for example, the European institutions like EIF, European Investment Funds, or others should put more money to co-investment structures?
I think that there is a liquidity problem in the market now, so we need to put money in the companies. If the creation of co-investment funds, of course, it's great, but as we saw from the idea of creating the co-investment fund until the money arrives to the company, sometimes it's 2 years, and 2 years is too much. So either there is a reform of how these institutions work, and there is a speed in the we can speed the process, or if the institutions want to have solutions for the current problem using solutions from the past where it took 2 years, I think it's going to be a problem. I think that one of the issues that we have, and we are on the early stage community as investors, but we as investors, if we have an opportunity to invest in a stable company that has been there in the market for 10, 15 years, has a lot of clients, has a product, as they have mitigated all the risks, and they are very cheap in terms of investing in them. Should we invest in this existing company, or should we try to pursue a new startup with a lot of risk, no proven market in this arena? So the startups that are now trying to fundraise will have, let's say, the competition of established companies that need cash and need funding. and the investors will need to think if they want to invest in an innovative, risky business or in an established and less risky business.
Okay, thank you, Paolo. By the way, I want to congratulate your book, Zero Risk Startup, which will be in the bookstores at the end of the year, I think. And we are looking forward to hear your golden rules to become a zero risk startup in the world. Thank you very much. Dear Tariq, are you around here?
I'm here, Baybars.
Yes, because we go in alphabetical order, and it is not my mistake to put your name as Tariq. Sorry.
No problems.
And you are our last speaker now. And Tariq, tell us how what are your comments about this virus issue? You are the president of Mediterranean Business Angels Network, and you are very active in the technology arena. And what are your comments?
So, Baybars, first of all, thank you for putting this together. Thanks to you to see all the familiar faces, friends, and co-workers. Hopefully, all of this ends up soon, and we'll be able to connect again physically. Second, I want to step a little bit, one step back and talk about cross-border investment in general. It's all about investing in outside of your comfort zone, outside of the areas where you're originally comfortable in. And the reason for cross-border investment, or what initiates that, is that there's an opportunity to invest in a certain market or in a certain startup in a different market that has potential to grow and eventually exit. So what happened after the pandemic, if we're looking at our investors from different clubs, is that I can classify those into two different groups. One of them is that the groups that have already bigger portfolios and bigger startups that they have invested in, and others who don't. So when this happened until now, the startups are actually suffering from, depending on their stage, depending on the industry they're operating in. So they're coming back to their investors with all the problems. So everyone has problems. Even the industries that are surging, they have problems of scalability and coping with the increased demand. So all of the investors who have bigger portfolios until now are actually trying to solve their portfolio problems and trying to keep their portfolios alive. So angel networks that have bigger portfolios are still in that stage. Where we look at other angel networks who do not have as big portfolios are actually looking into opportunities. I don't like the word opportunity because this whole situation is, people are dying. So we're not talking about opportunistic chances just for the sake of the word opportunity, but there's a market opportunity for the investor to invest in certain startups in certain sectors. So we're seeing actually more angel investors interested to join different clubs. So if we're looking at the Alexandria Angel Network, we're looking at other angel networks who are members. Now we're in 9 countries, but from the networks we connected to, we've seen a lot of people interested in angel investing in general as a different asset class because they are seeing an opportunity there. So it really varies on what's happening. Nevertheless, we on the cross-border level, things are not yet happening, but we are in talks about some deals that that we were originally in discussion. This is one. When it comes to our local angel groups, we are finding our investors stepping in to support their existing portfolios, to support the startups that are in need, whether it's financially in follow-on funding, whether it's by mentorship, by providing access to support, because most of the startups are trying to pivot, they're trying to adapt, they're trying to maintain cash, which is the key to survival. So these are the two ends of the story, or two different groups, and what we are seeing from different investors in our network.
Thank you very much, dear Tariq. Dear friends, now I think we have to go to questions of the audience immediately, because we are now I think we have only 10 minutes, by the way, and we have 78 questions, and we have still 138 audience in the room. So if you don't mind, I selected one question from all these, and let's answer this question, and let's try to answer the other questions by sending email to other question owners, if you don't mind. The question is interesting, and I think Israel Pons can answer this question. What are the five golden rules, advice? What are the five golden tips for entrepreneurs, startup, and SMEs can manage, lead, and prosper during the coronavirus crisis? Israel, are you around here?
Great, thank you.
Can you answer this question? Can you give 5 golden tips to entrepreneurs at the end of this webinar?
Yes, of course. And I think it's something, I think these tips, and just to make a bit of a context, is like all the SMEs, entrepreneurs, angel investors, we're looking for what will be the best new discipline that we could have, the best way to move forward, the best way to act. And we're looking for tips all the time online for the past 3, 4, 5, 8 weeks, however long we've been locked in. And I think I have a list that I started to put together for the past few days. The more than 5, but I will give some of them. I think the first one that should be very, very important, and the first golden tip, not just for entrepreneurs, but for SMEs and for everybody, is your well-being. We are all changing. We are all working on the different environment. And the best thing that you can do is create a personal discipline. We very easily can fall into having days where there are no productivity, starting being at home and eating a lot and start gaining weight. You start feeling depressed. There are financial pressures. There are social and psychological pressures that you haven't lived with before. And I think one thing that you have to do as an entrepreneur is look at your well-being, create a structure to your day, have family, home environment discipline of when you're going to watch some telly with them, when you're going to watch a film, all the parts when you're actually concentrating on different things. So there are a lot of distractions now. It's a new discipline to work at home. And I think your well-being is the most important thing. Don't forget to do any sort of form of exercise. Even if you're walking at home, try and break some sweat. That will make you feel better, and it will let you breathe some oxygen into your brain so that it actually becomes positive. Another thing that I can say is this is time to make quick, decisive actions. You need to make decisions quicker, and you need to act quicker, and you need to execute quicker than before. So before, when you were able to have meetings in the office or whatever you were, or meet somebody for a coffee somewhere, you took your time to make decisions. Now more than ever, you have to be very quick. Another one that I think it has to happen now, and Paul opened with his speech very clearly, and I thought, yeah, that's a quick summary. What would you say? Don't panic. Do not take decisions on panic elements. You know, you have to breathe, you have to take your time, and don't panic. Make quick decisions once you have thought about it, but do not panic, because the worst decisions are made when you're actually panicking. What else can I say? Well, you know, probably has been said before, but capital cash reserves are king. You know, more than ever, cash is king. But now you have to look at your P&L. You have to cut back. You have to make decisions to actually be efficient. You have to speak to your team. You have to tell them exactly what position you are in with cash reserves, and you have to reprogram. You have to plan for 50% of your sales drop at least, and then refinance that way. And then look for new capital. Go and look for investment. Yes, immediately right now it's going to be difficult, and every investor is probably going to say to you, be careful, we're not going to invest right now, we're making a decision soon. But actually, as we always say, don't look for cash when you haven't got cash in the bank. Look for cash when you have cash in the bank. So if you have got some money now for a runway of 2 or 3 months, start pitching for investment now. Look for who's doing webinars about investment. Look for angel investors in this room and approach them. Look for angel networks. Ask them if they're doing pitch online sessions, and probably the first 1 or 2 is not going to be successful. You're not going to get another meeting online, but you'll have to look for that. So I think those are some of the tips. And leadership, you got to become a leader, and you got to think about people. Don't be over positive. Remember that. Be a good leader who's honest, who's clear, and you tell your people where you're standing. Your team will appreciate the honesty at this time, because they'll be able to make decisions with their family, with their loved ones about what the situation is when they're working for a startup or SME that is in danger of survival. Remember, all the companies in all the world are in the same situation as you are. There are very few industries that are doing really well, but if that's not your industry, just think about this. There are other people in your situation. So you're not unique, but what you have to make unique is the way you react to it. So make a strategy, write down your list every day, 10 things that you're going to do that are going to make a difference that day for you and your family and your team of workers in your entrepreneurial world.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Israel. Victor,
Baybars, could I just
Linda,
add?
yes, please, of course.
Could I just add to what Israel suggested? One of the things where I think angels can really mentor their entrepreneurs is helping them with communication, because we know many entrepreneurs have a good forte there. So communicating with their investors, communicating to their staff, particularly the bad news if they have to go through layoffs, and of course, communicating to their customers. So that's a role all of us as angels, I think, can effectively provide, particularly during this difficult period of time. Thank you, Israel, for sharing your points.
Thank you. Linda, by the way, I want to announce that in May, maybe you know, the granddaughter of Nelson Mandela, Swati Mandela, is the president of Global Women Leaders Committee of the WBAF, and she is going to make 4 webinars for women entrepreneurs in May, and we will let you know, and it would be great to invite you also as a speaker, and I think she is also in the participants, among the participants now. Dear Dr. Done, and then Jonathan, Tarek, Paolo, dear Dr. El Jabbar, and Tommy Davis, just 10 words, your last 10 words and messages to entrepreneurs.
Okay, I start in words.
Who, if you are ready, please, Dr. El Jabbar.
No, I think it was a pleasure to participate. Despite all the difficulties, I think there's definitely hope, and I think this is the period where we can reinvent ourselves and reinvent or re-look at the opportunities. There are opportunities, and I was going to talk about them in the second round, but hopefully next time, because there are lots of opportunities, and we should not just look at the negative side. There are positive sides to the corona problems. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. El Jabbar. Jonathan?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think there's lots of great personal advice people have got for each other out there, using this time wisely. As I think was well said, we need to make sure that, you know, we look after family, and we look after those that are most hardest hit by this. But no, my message is, and Baybars, with your permission, I'll mention it. We think this is going to perhaps be the greatest entrepreneurial renaissance of time. As to say, I just want to come back to the fact that entrepreneurs have a stomach for these things. And I think it'll be a big leveling playing field because every entrepreneur would have been through the same situation. So whether you're from the poorest country or one of the most wealthiest. And I just want to point out something, and I can say this in the United States, we haven't coped nearly as well as some of the, shall I say, less sophisticated health systems and economies in the United States. So I think there's lots to be learned from everybody here. But very quickly, we have, so we'll be convening the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, will indeed still be proceeding in October. It's the first week of October. It's actually going to be held this year in Riyadh. And the reason I bring that up is that we will not be, that it will be free of charge to everybody to come that wants to be part of that rebuilding revolution, whether an investor, whether on a startup side, or whether on the refreshing of the ecosystems to enable them. And I just bring that up in my last word because I really, really hope that we can gather behind the people that have the energy and the confidence to help not just themselves and not just their investors and not just to repurpose their companies. But I think that we can rally that community to help those people who really, frankly, are struggling with helping themselves. Because I think it'd be nice if we all focus on where are the great opportunities ahead. But for every opportunity we pursue, we've been advocating all our entrepreneurs, take someone with you. Sit down with one entrepreneur. Jeff Hoffman, our chair, and all of our board actually spend at least half of their day on Zoom with entrepreneurs. Tell me what your anxieties are. And as Linda said, I think we can all be helping our entrepreneurs, almost like therapists, to be able to think through this process. So excited about that. And thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. And I don't mean to paint a too rosy picture, but I think part of our job is to try to look at the glass half full here and not just at the hourly headlines of the challenges that we all face. So thank you. And let's work together by staying apart. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you very much for your 10 words. And what is the web address to follow to join the Global Entrepreneurship Congress?
You can sign up actually as of today at gec.co. So www.gec.co.co. And I only mention that because we do have quote a COVID date, a rain date, in the event that circumstances do not open the Middle East up and the rest of the world up by October. But we're very focused on making it an empowering opportunity to help economies rebuild under the leadership of their entrepreneurs.
GEC.co. Thank you very much.
GEC.co. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Dear Dr. Done, what are your 10 words?
Well, 10 words. First of all, I would say that if you're able to help others in whichever way you can, and they ask for help, help other people. If you can't, tell them no. I think that's also very, very important.
Yes.
And, you know, we are going to survive this. This is a survival period, and some people are going to obviously not make it, and some companies won't make it, and some countries will stress out. But one last very important piece of advice, please don't waste a minute of your time on all of these conspiracy nonsense. Just don't waste your time with it. I know many of us receive from friends, what do you think about this? And sometimes out of politeness, I have to read it and say, look, brother, this doesn't make sense. But, you know, I decided to limit it to 1% because sometimes I just have to respond. Okay, so that's it.
Thank you. But you are a telecom person, Dr. Done. Please tell us if there is a relationship between this 5G issue and this virus. Please tell us.
Actually, I got this question from someone. I got it, you know, from quite a few people, but I got it from someone that I thought, you know, wouldn't take such a possibility seriously, and he was trying to think intelligently about the possibility of a correlation between, like, for example, like the US numbers where they had launched 5G, and then he was saying to me, and then what about Wuhan where they also launched the 5G first? And I'm saying, let us assume that's true. You know what? And I said, okay, now let's correlate it to the, for example, health condition of Americans, the obesity in the US. Basically, they're unhealthy people because obviously they're richer than other people. They can afford to kind of like eat the wrong things, if you see what I'm saying. And therefore, how about that correlation, perhaps compared to the average weight of a Chinese person, regardless, I don't trust all the Chinese numbers on definitions, but just on that. So what I mean to say, other than the science of it and the obvious exclusion of it, somebody has to understand why this happened. Somebody has to understand the people who could have done it better, for example. Somebody's job is to do that, but it's not your job, okay? So it's not your job. Focus on your friends, on your family, and on the survival of what it is that you are responsible for, and let other people worry about, you know, how this could have been done better, okay? Lessons learned. That's not your job. Neither is it mine.
Okay, thank you. It is not my job. Thank you. Tariq, what are your 10 words?
So in 10 words exactly, entrepreneurs, hang in there. We're on this together.
Thank you.
These are 10 words. My long version.
Thank you, Tariq. Tariq. You are a very good role model for all speakers in the world. Thank you very much. Dear Tommy Davis, what are your 10 words? Tommy, do you hear us? Okay. Paulo, what are your 10 words?
I think that for the government initiatives.
Oh, you had me on mute.
No, I didn't make anything, but okay. Are you mute now?
It's okay. Let Paulo finish first. It's rude to interrupt.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I think that for those people that want to know more what the countries can do and try to make their policymakers to change the way they are behaving, IBAN has done the IBAN European Union position paper, and this position paper can be used in other countries. One thing that I would like to talk, we are sometimes considering that the startups will all collapse and that there is nothing that we can do. But there are things that we as investors and sometimes as mentors of startups we can do, is try to talk with the workers there, the employees, and try to find a way that they can reduce their salary for a while, and try to get, for instance, some shares in the company so that they can take the risk. Because if there is not flexibility from the workers and there is fixed cost, the startup will collapse. And this, our experience can be very important in talking with unions and talking with employees, and not just putting money or not putting money. I think just some thoughts for business angels and other business leaders.
Thank you. Thank you for your 10 words too, Paulo. And Tommy Davis.
Right. I painted a doom and gloom picture, and I think I want to flip that back, because what I wanted to share is some of the things we are actually doing about coronavirus very, very quickly, knowing I've only got a couple of seconds. We are running competitions. We are funding. We've separated our startups into 3 different components. There are those who are having problems before coronavirus. There are those who are having problems because of coronavirus. And then there are those who are actually benefiting, as we found with some of the logistics people, from the coronavirus. And it's the vulnerable ones in between that we are focusing on, because we want to retain jobs. And we've managed to secure funding across the continent for quite a number of them. So we're trying to identify them. In addition, quite a number of startups have come up in response to the COVID-19 challenges all across the continent, and are doing amazing, amazing things. Thank you very much. I wish you all well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Tommy. Dear Dr. Done, Linda, Israel, Tarek, Jonathan, Paulo, Tommy, Dr. El-Jabbar, thank you very much for your contributions to this wonderful session. And I hope all participants found this webinar a rewarding experience. And let's keep in touch and see you on Thursday's webinar, where the 6th President of Mauritius, the Deputy Prime Minister of Portugal, and the former Digital Economy Minister of Tunisia, and Paul Donay will come together again, and we are going to talk more about the policy makers' response to corona issue. Thank you very much. All the best. Bye bye.
Thanks, Baybars.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye bye.